Welcome everyone. I'm Karen Cannell. Thank you so much for the introduction. This is amazing Friday afternoon to have so many people here, and I'm excited to be here. And hopefully, sometime soon, I can actually come to you. But for now, we'll do this. This talk is about Apex Interactive Grids, how to standardize for really for sanity and productivity. My company's TH Technology. I've been doing Apex consulting uh, since Apex started. It's been a long time. I'm actually a mechanical engineer that got into software, never looked back. I've been building Apex applications since they came out. I was fortunate to work with the Oracle consulting team when it was Project Marvel, if anyone remembers that. I'm very involved in Oracle user groups, and I'm so excited to see how active your user group is and how many of you are here, even though we're virtual on Zoom. It's real important to stay connected because I believe our user groups are the best way, the most effective way for us to learn Oracle technology, the fastest and certainly the most cost effective. So right now I'm president of ODTUG. If you haven't checked out ODTUG, check that out. I am an ACE director, which just means I get to do more of this stuff that I love to do. If you look in here, kind of way about there's a little buoy. I'm about the right side of that. This is my happy place. When I need to stay sane, I go somewhere and swim. This happens to be in St. John and in Cinnamon Bay. I mention this because at the beginning of this pandemic stuff, everything went online. The tendency was for those of us to work online to do everything online, and I started getting very squirrely. Whatever you do to keep yourself sane, walk away from your computer, go outside, leave the building, do jumping jacks, stand on your head, whatever you do, play with your family, play with your dogs, do what you need to do to stay sane through all this. Don't forget your happy place, because we'll get through this as long as we just keep doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, whatever the form or shape that takes in your community. We'll get through this stuff. This is the point where I like to ask you guys, so I get a feel for who I'm talking to, what your Apex experience is, what versions you're on, how much fun you have or not working with interactive grids, and how many JavaScript experts are there out there. Dan McGann is my JavaScript. He's my idol. I'll never be as fluent as he is in JavaScript. What I'm going to assume here, since I can't take a poll, is that you guys have a fair amount of Apex experience. You know your way around. You've used grids a little bit. You're on a version 5.1 or higher, which means you have access to interactive grids, and you're mainly working with Apex. You've got that PL SQL background and are now just starting to get into the JavaScript stuff, which is the direction that the Apex team is pointing us. So this whole talk is about standardizing your interactive grids, why and how, and some best practices. And I always like to, when I talk about Apex in general, show the sandbox. What the Apex team has given us is a sandbox with a lot of nice, neat toys that we can do a lot of things really easy in the sandbox. Do we have to stay in the sandbox? No, we can do anything in an Apex app that we can stuff on an HTML page. We don't have to stay in framework. We can use other JavaScript frameworks if we like. We can code HTML from scratch if we like. But if we're out of the sandbox, we're not supported. What I'm going to show you the rest of this presentation is supported ways to standardize your interactive grids. Apex is a low-code development platform. Do it the easy way first. Stay in the sandbox, follow the declarative ways as much as you can, and that way when you upgrade, it'll be easier for yourself or the next person. That said, a lot of what we do when we customize interactive grid leaves that low-code stuff behind. Thus the need to really standardize when you get into toolbar and button and row action menu configuration. So you're like, okay, what are you talking about? You're scaring me. So hang on, a little bit of background here. Interactive grids are the sum total of interactive reports and tabular forms, and all our gripes and begging and all the features we ever wanted that we told the Apex team, they came up with interactive grids. And the direction here is that interactive reports and tabular forms will eventually be replaced by interactive grids with tabular forms, where they're now with interactive reports. That's in the future. That is only going to happen if and when all interactive report features are handled by interactive grids. So we already know that's not going to be for a little while, but you may have noticed things in 20.1, the out-of-the-box PDF printing is on interactive grids first. Interactive grids is the reporting solution, the one that's in the forefront going forward. So we'll get there, but it's going to be a while. If you're going to get into customization and you're one of these engineer type people like I am, I highly recommend you read John Snyder's hardlikesoftware.com Interactive Grid Under the Hood. This was written before interactive grids were fully released the first time. I'm not going to go through the whole thing now, even if you don't want to read that and don't care so much. This is an interactive grid architecture. This is right from John Snyder's blog post. Anything in blue here is a JavaScript widget. And you say, wait a minute, Karen, I didn't think Apex was all that much JavaScript. Well, starting with interactive grids, they're writing more and more things in JavaScript widgets. And that gives us some of the client-side features that we've wanted in Application Express that we haven't been able to do before. Do you have to be a JavaScript expert to use interactive grids? Not at all. So don't get nervous there. I'm just pointing out that this is a departure from how the rest of Apex was traditionally built. And you'll see more of this in the future, more JavaScript widgets coming in. The other thing to note here is anything in yellow is a module, Apex item. In interactive grids, every column is an Apex item. Behaves and takes plugins the same as an Apex item. That is huge because we can do a lot more things like cascading list of values or using a ratings plugin, for example. These things are much easier to do now in interactive grids, almost declaratively, that took lots and lots of JavaScript to do and lots of coding to do with tabular forms. The other thing to note here is anything green is an instance of that module. And every time you see model in terms of interactive grids, think data. In tabular forms, we had the PL SQL arrays. In interactive grids, we have models. And you're like, well, wait a minute, I have one interactive grid and I've got 5 different models down there. Grid model is the tabular model. The group by model is the group by format of your data. If you use the icon or the detail views, there are models that goes with this. Models meaning groups of data that go with that presentation of your interactive grid query or base table that it's pointed on. Most of the time, and especially in this presentation, we're dealing with the grid model. Do it declaratively first if you possibly can. That's the whole low code thing. There are lots of declarative settings, and you've probably heard people, and you've probably said yourself, hey, I went into interactive grids and I don't have nearly the same amount of settings as I did in interactive reports. Well, that's true, but I can turn edit on and off. I can authorize add, update, delete just by using a standard Application Express authorization role. Lazy loading performance, pagination, the things that you would expect, the no data found message, download, chart view, icon view. Do I want the toolbar on and off? These are all declarative settings that I encourage you to go in. I'm not going to go through them, element by element here. Go in and learn what these do, because these all make a big difference for your interactive grids. Not everything is declarative. There's a ton in there, but say I want to just totally turn the column header off, or I want to add and remove toolbar buttons or row actions, or I want to change the action menu options. Well, for those, we write code in this for the column header. It's in the column advanced JavaScript region. If it's for toolbar buttons, it's in the grid attributes advanced JavaScript, and if it's in for the action menu, then I actually go in the page advanced JavaScript. So now you're going, oh, wait a minute, Karen, that's like, you said code, but you really mean like JavaScript code. And yes, in fact, all these customizations are JavaScript. And for anyone getting a little nervous, don't worry, because as you will see, it's very easy. And if you could write the stuff you had to write for PL SQL arrays for doing tabular form customizations, then this stuff is going to be a piece of cake. So most grids are a combination of declarative and customizations. So, you know, what is proper for your interactive grids, for your organization, for this application versus the second application. Maybe one deals with commercial applications, maybe one deals with recreational users. I do a lot of things with fisheries, and what we send to recreational people is very different than what we send to commercial people that have quotas and timelines and standards and deadlines. So we can customize our grids to do things like get rid of the search bar, just have a filter bar, a save, and a refresh. I don't know how useful that is, but we can do that. We can pop that filter button up, have custom help on the pages. I can define my own actions so that custom help can go wherever you want it to go. I can add things to the row actions menu. I can just pop my delete button up and my refresh button up and tie things down. Just a few examples. This one's really interesting. This is right out of the Interactive Grid Cookbook from John Snyder's. Change the look and feel of that whole row actions menu, because there I've got a delete button right there and a few more actions I can do. And just in case you're wondering, that star rating, that's a plugin. That is not a customized, it's not a customization of the grid at all. That's a standard thing. If you've got an item plugin, you can make that column or any column a plugin. So that's just an example of things that we can do with interactive grids that we couldn't do with tabular forms. So we have all that freedom to do things, but consider 5 developers, 5 different grids, because we give them the same thing, and even 5 developers in the same application. We're going to end up with 5 different grids. And let me just jump in. I know that's like way too many slides before I show you something. This application is, if you email me at the end of this, or at any time, I can forward this application to you. It's got a lot of application Express interactive grid stuff in it. We're just going to focus on the standards part today. So say, for example, we did, we gave someone, oh, and this is where I really wish I could ask if everyone can see. I'm just going to increase things a little. Say we have five different grids on the same table, same set of data. So the first guy builds things with a whole bunch of defaults, doesn't really do anything with pagination, leaves on that float, that leaves on the default things, and that's what we get, 18 rows, and it just scrolls per normal. The second person kind of locked things down, but look, they changed the headings, you know, instead of, they called it name instead of emp name, and position instead of job, and supervisor, and you know, they put some thought into it, right? But then they kind of didn't size the column, so we have a scroll bar here. They didn't really do anything with pagination other than this scroll. They set you know, so you're getting the idea. Add emp instead of add employee, and then we have yet another iteration of the same thing. Yep, nope, yes, no. These are, some are, one's a switch, 2 are select list, this one's a nothing, select list, switch. These are, yeah, so you're getting the idea. And there's one more down here where the guy was like, guy or gal, I say guy as a generic term. to cover everything, just to be. And then this person used that they really like this button. I like that button too, but use it where it belongs. You know, did it belong here? I don't know. Maybe it did, but he didn't ask anybody. So, you know, so which one of these is right? Here I have the row actions menu, there I don't. Someplace I have a sequence number, another place I don't. So which one's right? So these kind of things will happen if you don't standardize on your grids. And here's this is a scarier one. One developer over 5 different days, I can build 5 different grids on the same thing because I think I did it this way, but did I really, or was I sure? And then even easier, same person on the same or different days in 5 different applications, I may come up with, you know, 5 different versions of the same grid. I might use emp no in one and emp number sign in another, or employee and then employee name. Those kinds of things, as little as they seem to we developers, you know, well, it all makes sense. They know what we're talking about. Um, Users like things the same. Users like things consistent. Users like things the way they're used to naming them. So if I'm at a company and they call their employees clients, then maybe I want to have it say client instead of employee. That might not be the best example, but you get the gist. You know, talk to your end users, use a nomenclature they use it consistently. Use select list consistently on that column, use the same select list consistently on that column. So have standards, and for developers, this is going to save you sleep and sanity, because you'll know, oh, when I see that, this is what I do. I just showed you this mixed up application, and this stuff, if you don't have standards that everyone knows, that everyone uses, this stuff just organically happens. You know, you'll do it to yourself. And what you want to avoid is your end users sitting there going, oh, I don't like this thing. I don't like this thing. I don't understand it. I don't know how it works. Because that just leaks out sideways all over the place. And worse yet, you and I as developers don't want to feel like this. Like, what the heck do they want here? I don't know. I have to go look it up again. You know, have your standards and use them. So main reasons to standardize, trust me, we're going to get into code shortly. User experience, you want your end users happy. Users like consistency, they like the same thing, they don't like to change. So let's keep our end users happy. If your end users are happy, you get invited back to do more. How many times have you heard, I hear as a consultant, I like the way Peter did it. I like the way Peter did it. And all Peter did was turn the toolbar off, or turn it on, or turn the edit buttons off when the grid wasn't editable, so it didn't have that clutter. Be consistent, because that helps you keep your end users really, really happy. The other main reason to standardize your grid is it's going to make development for everyone across the board faster and smoother, and maintenance is going to be easier. You're not going to have to question, why did they do it this way? Because if there is an exception, we all know when there's an exception, we comment it and say, this is different because. We all do that religiously, right? Right. Developer sanity. It's easier on my brain if things are done consistently and with standards. I can do them faster. I can do enhancements faster. What to standardize from an end user perspective? Column names, types, order, size. On my grid, I can jump back in there for a second. Ename, hire date, salary, and then the things. Empno is at the end over here. Empno, empnum, you know, empno, empnum. In a situation like this, you know, standardize on where these columns live. What is the proper order? Do we show employee name before job and manager? Do we show manager before job? Do you want to show the hire date? Do you always have to show salary and commission? These are all, it seems so trivial, but these are important things to standardize, because that way your users know what to expect. Toolbar configuration, where the buttons are, what they do you have icons on them or not? Even as simple things like add row versus add employee. If you use text and icons, which we can do declaratively in the new version, put your icons on the same side all the time. It is so weird to me to have the icons on the left, 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 and then this button over here, the icons on the right. And I guarantee you one of your users is going to say, why is that one that way? Because it means something different if it looks different. Then when you get down to pagination and the number of rows displayed, shading, if you have shading on columns, a conditional shading, and there's an example in this application, if you use that, make the shading the same color. Because again, a user's going to ask, what does this color mean versus that color? And if it doesn't mean anything, make it the same, because a user in their brain is going to be something. As far as developers, you want to standardize so there's no guessing. When I go in to start to build something, I know what I'm going to build and how. I'm not reinventing the wheel. I don't have to call next door for directions. I don't have to look up in my notes from last week. I have a common code base and settings to work from. And here's where you're going to use your JavaScript experts. If you have an in-house, Dan McGann or Jeff Kemp or Scott Wesley, use them to do your JavaScript stuff and let them give you the settings to use for toolbar configurations. So to summarize, have standards. And this slide, whenever we talk about standards, we shouldn't need this slide, but we do. Have standards, use those standards, share them with everyone around you. If the new person comes, make sure they know them, and really, really use them all the time. Enough said about that. Features, buttons, pagination, action, shortcuts. Are you using chart views or group by views, icon views, detail views? Especially those icon views and detail views, if you use them, share the code and the look that you're using so that they look the same, they look consistent. If you use a badge look across the detail views, stick with it. If you use a cards view across detail views, stick with that cards view. It's just makes your users, gives them warm and fuzzies, and then they sing your praises, and then you get more work and you get to retire early or something like that. Use a template. If you need to build a custom template, use that, pass them around, and pay attention to column names, formats, alignments, things like that. Build a cheat sheet. I cannot give you the magic elixir to this is how the best way to standardize grids. But once you sit down with whomever you're working with and say, here's our standards, copy it off, send it around, put it in the memo, laminate it, put it on your wall, whatever it takes, build one, copy, duplicate. In certain cases, you might want to have something complex enough that you can build a plugin. If you are doing toolbar customizations, row action menu customizations, there are plugins out there. Use one of those if you like, but be consistent in what you do with those. Number one thing, use a common configuration file, and I'm going to show you that shortly, like right here. Okay, this is the fun part. I was actually at this leave page, by the way. I made changes on my page. I must have touched a value somewhere. I think I touched the yes, no columns. It knows that there's something that I didn't save on this page. This is out of the box with the latest Apex versions and out of the box with interactive grids. There is a way to turn it off, by the way, but we're not going to for here. The story is, we were doing an upgrade. Oh, and I was playing and I didn't take it out, so I'm going to go back to the standard grid here. We're doing an Apex upgrade, and different people from actually Apex 4.1 to 19.2. So different people had different applications, and some of these applications had tabular forms. And the rule was, that our unwritten informal rule was, all tabular forms will be updated to interactive grids. And so by default, the interactive grid would, here's all the default stuff. The action menu looks very much like an interactive report, my edit and save. And so this would be for example, my upgraded interactive grid and my upgraded tabular form that is now a grid. And we got partway through and we didn't do reviews on everyone, but I happened to see in a meeting, I'm like, wait a minute, why is that not a grid? And I was told I cannot upgrade to interactive grids. My users are used to a delete button and a save button right over here. They have no delete button. I cannot possibly give them interactive grids. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And you never brought it up, you just did that. Well, in interactive grids, in the default layout, by default, the delete row is in here. Also right next to it is the refresh row. For whatever reason, they didn't want to retrain these users, and there was angst and drama and whatever, hair tearing and whatever. And I said, wait. Did you realize that you can customize that interactive grid? And with a little bit of JavaScript in the attributes advanced JavaScript initialization code, you can bring that delete button right up to the toolbar. So, and then we even named it delete selective rows. And we can move that save button over to where your users are a little more comfortable. We can put that add button over where they were used to seeing an add row button. And we, since we pulled the delete up, we'll pull up that refresh and cancel. So now we can do that same thing. They still have to click, and they can delete those rows from here. Now they're not deleted because this is a grid. They're not deleted until I actually say save, and I pulled up that refresh over here. This is the same actions, this delete and refresh, as what's in here in delete row and refresh row. I just pulled it up to the toolbar. So how did I do that? Not hard at all. I did a little bit of initialization code. And okay, how did you learn this, Karen? I looked at the sample interactive grid application. I read John Snyder's blogs about interactive grids. I downloaded the interactive grid cookbook, and I looked at examples that had sort of kind of what I thought I needed. And by looking at those, and this did not take me months, this did not even take me weeks. I said, oh, that looks like that. Oh, that's how we did that. And most of the Apex developers I know, including most of you out there, are going to think the same way and know the same thing. So the way this customization works is I have this function here. And what I'm going to do is this config.toolbar data, I'm going to rebuild my toolbar. So from looking at examples out there, and now from reading the documented APIs, I want group together true. I want the controls, the search button. So that's my search field and my search button grouped together because they're usually stuck together. Makes sense. Then I want that add employee button. Now I could have named it anything, but and all it's doing is an add row. But in this case, add employee. Now this aligned end, I want these buttons aligned to the end of the toolbar, the right side of the toolbar. So here's my delete selected rows. Selection delete is the exact same action that's in that row actions menu. How do I know that? I looked at other examples. I read the documented APIs. Then I add the save button. Again, it's that same save. I'm using built-in interactive grid actions. I'm not building any of my own. I'm just moving buttons around. So there's my save button. Here's my refresh cancel button. And here's my reset report button. And we need that. Oh, don't do that. Never do that in a demo. For those who weren't watching, I sort of screen grabbed some text there, which I didn't want to do because I want this to work when I close it. So, but just by adding that, doing a save, running the application, I've got working buttons. I've just moved them. And actually, they're still here. I didn't do anything to move them from here. If someone wanted to at this point, they could turn off that row actions menu. You can't turn off the select box, but so this was really cool. I am not a JavaScript expert, and I figured out how to do that, and I said, hey, try this. And I think they started using it. And now, before you go like, oh, Karen said to move the delete buttons up to the toolbar. This is just an example of what I did to convince one person that interactive grids are flexible, more so than he or she thought. And this is one example of a grid customization to suit what the end users were expecting. If you're just customizing for kicks because you think it's pretty, talk to your end users first. Give them what they want. Give them what makes sense for them. So, so say we wanted to do this once, and say we're in this upgrade project where we have, I think we had 35 to 40 applications, and who knows how many tabular forms in each application. And we had, say, 6 developers going across. I do not want all my developers building customizations like this. I don't want them taking the time to do that. I don't want them coming out different. I want things all the same. So how do we achieve that? So we do something that's called a global configuration file. And what I'm going to do, kind of like when we have CSS that we want to use again and again and again, I'm going to put it in a global configuration file. And then I'm going to include that configuration file in my application at the top level of my user theme. I'm taking the time to go here because it's kind of hard to find. I think it's a little easier in some of the later ones. As a matter of fact, they did change it. And where's my files? Here we go. So I have this file that I just include. It's JavaScript that's included for all pages of my application. Then let's go back to my page. Come on up here. I should be on my page. So, and let me show you what this file looks like. So what this file has, it's just a big, and I'm showing you in Visual Studio just because the shading is better, the color coding is better than SQL Developer or other tools you may use. But I just called it THTech iGrid app, common IG config for common grid configuration. And then I just started putting in here, sticky footer false. We always want sticky footer false. But here's the fun part. If the ID, so if this static ID, if this region with the static ID, the current static ID has the class sequence number, then add a row header sequence. If it has the class no reorder, then apply this default grid view options no reorder. Here's where it gets kind of fun. This set and scroll, and these will be whatever works for you for your customizations. Here's the one we just went through. This should look familiar. So it says if has class add del save. Here's the group together. Here's my search field and a button. Here's my add row. Here's my selection delete. Here's my save, on and on. So what I'm going to do in this page, now remember this page right now is a regular grid. I'm going to go in, this is my grid. I'm going to go into the attributes, that advanced JavaScript area, initialization code. And, oh, I'm on the wrong page. I want to be on this page. I want to edit this page. Because if you notice, that had the whole text, and that I want to avoid copying all that text. So down in here, all I did, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this reference, th-deck igrid app, common igrid config, and I'm going to copy that right into that JavaScript initialization code. Now, by itself, that's not going to do anything. It's just there. But now, here's the magic. I'm going to go here, and for the CSS classes, for this grid, for the appearance of this grid, I'm going to say add del save, and I think that's proper. When in doubt, look at my little cheat sheet down here, and I'm just going to select that for now. But I have add del save, and make sure it's capitalized correctly in my CSS classes, add del save. So I've added the reference to my function that's in my include file. Now I've added the CSS class, and now when I run this page, my grid is that same delete button toolbar that I did somewhere else. So I can give the config file and the set of classes that's in the config file to the next 25 developers down the pike. None of them has to write a piece of JavaScript. They just need to know which class to use and to include the file. So that's the beauty of the standard configuration file. So that's why you would do that. Now, if I wanted to add more, so you say, Karen, there were more in there, more functions in there. So maybe I want to do the filter only grid and the sequence number. So there were both those filter only grids and the add delete save in that same configuration file. So what's going to happen here? Anybody got a guess? Well, we get the sequence number because that's independent of the toolbar, but we got the delete version of the grid because in this file, it's the second one. It's the one that gets, as you go through the code, it'll say if has class filter only, it'll do that, and it gets down to the end of the file, and it does the other thing. So if I wanted filter only, and this would be only for a non-editable grid, and you'll see why in a minute, then I can't have the add delete save at the same time. So you have to be kind of smart about how you combine your classes, but this will get you there. Now there's another thing. So if I had a setup like that, for this page of 5 or 6 different grids here, I'm going to edit this page, and we can do this now. And I'm in the attributes of all these. I'm going to add in the advanced JavaScript code. I'm going to pull this from here. You notice this is not an email from address. That was just a handy place for me to put it. I'm going to save that. And then on these same grids, I'm going to go to add class. And I'm going to say add del save. And then these grids will all have the same toolbar configuration. Pretty much. Now this is not editable. You can't delete there, so that's disabled, but the button still shows. Delete wasn't allowed here. So this is a role for delete. So easy way to do things. You can do it easily across multiple grids, etc. There's some gotchas here, and on this page, I believe I'm already add delete. I have my add delete save. Beware of how the declarations work in combination with the new toolbar that I just built. So, for example, if someone wasn't aware of that and came into the attributes of this grid and said, I want to edit off. Just simply turn edit off. Well, how does that affect my toolbar? Well, I don't have delete, so things are gone. This refresh now does nothing except refresh my data because there's no rows to refresh. The other one that's kind of more, a little, I see it happen more often, is this toolbar. I did my own toolbar, so I don't need that toolbar. So just turn it off, expecting that I'll still get my buttons and stuff because I defined my own toolbar. Well, no, I get no toolbar at all because the toolbar at this declarative level is saying, do I include that toolbar at all? What I did in the JavaScript over here is I defined what the toolbar looks like and what buttons are in there. So same thing here, if I have my toolbar on and I say turn off these search fields and the actions menu, then I'm going to have my declarative toolbar minus the search fields and the actions menu. So be aware of how things work declaratively because you can kind of step on your own toes if you don't understand how the declarative things turn things on and off and your customizations define what the toolbar looks like and where your buttons are. Same thing for if you do customizations to the row actions menu, etc. I'm going to move right along here. Column headers get standardized too, and I'll leave it for you guys to read all this stuff. This happens on every single interactive grid out there. By default, I can do a whole bunch of things to EmpNo, but maybe I don't want them getting rid of the EmpNo button. Maybe I just don't want that. And maybe some of them they can get rid of and some of them they can't, but there are places where I don't want all these things happening. In the column headings menu, I have some things to turn on and off, but not all of them. Now this is neat. Enable them to sort and control break and aggregate. If I turn off sort, the other one stays on. So it looks like I have everything off here. I turn this back on EmpNo, I can still do too many things. Come on. That's not how it used to work, but that might be, oh, that's because I have this here on EmpNo. Let me take this off. Anyhow, I'm doing an extra step. So EmpNo here, when I declaratively turn everything off, this is what you get. When I really want to turn off that entire header, I need to use this. And if you can't see that, default grid column options, no header activate true. And I'm sure there is a way to put this into a configuration file somewhere. I just haven't played around enough to do that. So now my EmpNo is truly off. And I can go and add that same thing to all my other columns. It's already on job. But the way I would do that is just, go down, select all of these on the way down, and go to that same, this is a thing for people on older Apex versions. We weren't able to do things like this before. That's a really sweet one. The other thing that you might want to turn off here is I might not want people to move columns around. If you don't want that, if you really, really don't want that, it's not in the column headings. It's back over in your declare file in here, this no reorder. And I really recommend that you put it in here as a customization option, because then I can just go into my grid, and where would I go? I go here, I go to my CSS classes, I have an add del save. I don't need the filter only. Why? Because that's just redundant. and I'm going to say no reorder. And now when I run this grid again, I can no longer reorder columns. And that may be what you want. I do have a sort on this one, so even with no header activate, that sort shows up, something you should be aware of. You may have to block that another way. Okay, enough good stuff? All right, back to some slides for a little bit. That's mainly what I wanted to show you guys. And do it declaratively first, but be careful of those combinations of what the declarative does versus what your customization in terms of the location and the actions and what your buttons actually do. So don't shoot yourself in the foot. I showed you these examples. Showed you these examples. There are plugins out there. There's more than one or two right now. Niels de Bruin has one out there as well. A plugin by itself does not standardize. It just makes it easier to do a whole bunch of different things. So if you don't want to write your own JavaScript, look at some of these plugins, but standardize the same way. I'm going to talk about JavaScript APIs a little bit. The rest of these slides, if you download them, if you don't have them, email me, I'll get them to you. There are tons of examples that are delineated in the application itself. I give you the application, the code, the slides, the whole shebang. I'm not going to go through all the slides here. There's like 80 slides in this deck. Don't worry, I'm not going through them all. But this is important. As of 18.1, we have documented APIs. When you write JavaScript code for customizing your interactive grids or customizing anything in Application Express, use the supported APIs. Documented equals supported. That means when you upgrade, your code will still work, and if it doesn't, you can file a bug. Trust me, it's really worth it. And there's a few examples here. If I was extending a toolbar, I'd say copy default toolbar. So that gets my toolbar data, pulls back the same thing. In the delete example, the delete toolbar I gave you, we created our own new one. So we didn't use copy default toolbar. But in this case, we're just adding the filter dialog to the existing toolbar. In the group of actions 1, which you'll read the doc and you'll find out there's really 7 locations that you can stuff buttons in a toolbar. That first one being where the search column, the search field and button are. This is just examples. This really has nothing much to do with toolbar configuration or customization, but this is one you'll use a lot. Interactive grid, get actions, invoke, save, how to save an interactive grid via JavaScript. You'll be using these a lot. This is wherever we see model, we're getting the record metadata. So this gets me the metadata for the current row. On leave model data, get value for the current record. For the on leave column, if it's yes, then do whatever. So on leave is actually a Boolean, and this is taken from code that, voila, updates record highlights based on if the user is, if the row, the employee is on leave, then they're grayed out. So that's what that does. Again, get the context record, the one that was clicked on, go to the model, get the value of ename, and all that says is welcome to Kscope, Blake. Another example, get the salary, total the salary. This is in a row actions menu. This is a typical dynamic action validation. Apex.item gets you the item, get value gets the value of that item. Every item, every column is an item. So when you see Apex item in relation to a grid, that's a column, my salary column. This is where we do those customizations. This I talked about before, in advanced JavaScript code in the appropriate place. Tons to read. Really, if you're going to do this stuff, read it, look at it. I talked about the plugins. I have examples of all of these. I'm not going to go over these. It shows you what it is, shows you the code, shows you a little bit more of the code and what happens. What I'm going to do is go to talk about the standardized thing with the config file. This is a review. You just watch me do this. We're going to create the global JavaScript configuration function for my grids in one JavaScript file. You're going to include the file in your application. You're going to reference the JavaScript function in the grid attributes advanced JavaScript code area, and then you're just going to add classes on your grids. So there's the file with the common, classes and names. Here's where I add the file to my application and just where I normally add JavaScript files. Then for the global settings here, I'm going to add the reference to that function in the JavaScript initialization code, and I'm going to add classes on the grid, CSS classes in the appearance area. And then everybody's happy. Users, developers, everybody's jumping up and down like minions. And my apologies if you don't like minions. I know some people can find them annoying, but to me, they're just like decorated Twinkies. How can you not love them? They're cute. If there is a mistake, you're going to see this. Nothing happened. Don't panic. It just means you have a JavaScript error, and you'll just start debugging your JavaScript. You'll figure it out and go from there. Everything I've just showed you does not follow the usual best practices, like putting all your code in JavaScript files and minimizing the code. This is not ready for production. This is just demo, sample, whatever. You're welcome to have it. Please, if you use any of this, please make it production ready. And here's a reference as to advice for using, JavaScript in Application Express the right way. And that's about it. Have standards, figure out what those settings are, be consistent, use that standard global file to help yourself. And main thing is stay sane yourself and keep your end users happy. And we're all jumping up and down, and it's Friday afternoon, and you can do fun things. This is just the tip of the iceberg of things that can be done with interactive grids. I'm sure there are far more complex things. If you look at the Interactive Grid Toolbook, cookbook, there's a ton more fun things out there, and there is a 9.2 version, 19.2 version out there that's a lot of fun. So questions, there's some here. Hopefully they're in English. Yes, the example apps are available to share.
And after that is the same question.
Okay, perfect. Is it possible to make buttons icon only? Yes, and for details on how to do it, just send me an email. It's just in how you define the button. And I think I had said icon, include icon, or there's a setting there. If you pour through the APIs for this, or even look in the Interactive Grid Cookbook examples, you will see examples where it's icon only. Because you may just want to show that little delete the trash can. View, create, and delete, but who to process, update. Updates in an interactive grid all get processed by the save button, whether it's a create or an update. So you may want to change a button accordingly. You may want to have two buttons and show one that says save or insert, and conditionally show the other that says update. That's totally up to you and what your end users expect. And hopefully that addresses your question there. I think that's overkill. I like save or submit that covers both cases. Are these grid functionalities, this is a good question, from Apex 19 or 20, or they came from earlier Apex version? Whatever version grid started with, everything I just showed you is totally possible. With the caveat that as of Apex 18.1, these APIs are now documented and supported. So the APIs from 5.1 to 18.1 did change a little bit. So if you're on a 5.1 version, you may run into that, but this sort of standardization with the file and doing this sort of customization to the toolbar or your row actions menu, all still supported the specific API code is supported as of 18.1. So if you're on 5.1, you'll be able to get help. They'll probably tell you upgrade to the latest one, but any more questions? There's one I can't read here.
No, there is no more questions. I
Okay.
think they just asked for if you will share this presentation, and you said yes, and you
Yes.
say email for demo and apps. Dice Karen que podemos escribirle un email para las aplicaciones de demo, las presentaciones, etcétera. Estas son sus coordenadas. La podemos seguir también con esos datos. Karen, I think this is all.
Yes. There's yeah. No, this is it. There's tons of resources at the end here. I'm not going to go through them all, but so if you get the slides, you'll have a lot of references as well.
Okay, we can write to you to have the references.
Yes, I have stuff ready for you.
Thank you very much. We are very grateful. And I repeat the invitation for you to come to Paraguay whenever it's possible, or to talk to the Paraguayan community of Apex that is really big and it's growing.
I would be honored to come talk to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy Friday. And Dan is next.
Sí. Bueno, les agradecemos mucho que hayan estado acá. Ahora abrimos la siguiente presentación, también en inglés. Y va a estar disponible la grabación al email para los contactos con ella. Muchísimas gracias.